Coming up this week on TDL Synth Chat, Dan Phillips from Korg USA returns to the show, talking about the new PS-3300 plugin that's a recreation of the enormous 1977 synth that was really rare and only just remanufactured by Korg in very limited amounts. It's an amazing synth, so Dan's going to be talking about why they chose the 3300 and how they went about developing a plug-in recreation of that classic machine. We'll also be talking about the other synths in the Korg Collection and of course talking about my favourite synth, the multi-poly. So let's get straight to Dan. Oh, incidentally, there's a free sound pack for the 3300 coming out. Link will be in this description. So that's 26 performances that I've created especially for the 3300, and you can find those in a free download. And the music you're hearing as well was created with the 3300 as well. Right, let's get to Dan. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Ian. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it's great to get you back on the show. Dan Phillips from Korg R&D over in California. And yeah, it's definitely great to get you. I think it's the third time you've been on the show now. And each time you've had a new interesting product to talk about, which has been fantastic. So we could talk about a new product tonight, the PS-3300 in the Korg Collection 6. So I've been playing with that quite a bit. So I want to talk about that. But first, I'll catch up with some other things. So I know it's been a busy year for you guys at Korg. Lots of products and lots of development going on.
That's true. Yeah, it's the 3300 especially. We initially thought that was going to be simple because we'd already done some work on the MS-20 and had a nice MS-20 filter now after the multi-poly, and we had just done a modular synth with the 2600, which is very complicated. And so we looked at the 3300. We thought, oh, this is going to be simple. We're going to knock this one out pretty quickly, and that was really not the case. It took a lot of effort to do. It was a surprising thing, and I think it's worth it. But it's a very different beast. It's very different from what we understood at the beginning. Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll definitely talk about that. I just want to mention as well the multi-poly. So that's been out for just over 12 months now, I suppose. Was it 24? It came out end of 23. It's been a while.
Yeah, I think it came out a little while ago. It's a little bit difficult for me to remember, I have to admit, because the other thing is that we started on it earlier than it was released.
Yes,
of course.
So, but yeah, it's been a brilliant instrument. That my multiple is here right in front of me. It's I do all the sound design on this here in conjunction with the editor, and it's such a brilliant program as synth. A sound designer said, I can just feel like you can sort of turn it to do whatever you need it to do, and I think, and I know it's multi-poly sort of with the heritage of the monopoly, but it's a modular system, isn't it? It's in a nice desktop synth keyboard, and I've really enjoyed programming it, and you can push it quite a long way and do stuff that don't appear so obvious at first, especially with all the mod processors and everything else. So yeah, I've really enjoyed programming that. I've created CS80 type sounds, PPG wave type sounds, monopoly. You can really create a vast range of sounds and things that none of those synths could do, because you can kind of combine the best of both worlds. I think that's probably my favourite part of it. If you can do a bit of CS80, but you can also do a bit of monopoly and bring them together with 2600 routing and so on. So yeah, I think it's been a great set. Really enjoyed programming it. Very
cool.
Yeah. I've done quite a few sound packs for it now and quite a few tutorials. The tutorials have been really good. I've really enjoyed doing them, and I've really enjoyed really learning the synth properly. And I've got to say the manual has been really helpful as well, because especially when you get to mod processors, trying to understand all the different areas you can target with it. I think I found the manual very useful for sort of getting my head around that.
I'm glad to hear that. I know a lot of people really appreciate your tutorials and sounds too. Great stuff.
Yeah, it's good. So yeah, so I would say brilliant synth. Yeah, absolutely love it. So and of course the Wavestate and Modwave.
It's really great to hear.
Still love those as well. I've seen a lot of new people coming into as well. I don't know whether you guys have seen that, but the multi-poly is attracting a lot of people that perhaps weren't looking at, say, Modwave and Wavestate before. New people coming into it, looking for that sort of deeper synth, and I think that's good to see.
Yeah, I think it's. I think we're gathering a reputation now, and I think that's helpful.
Yeah, and some of the forums and things where people can be a little bit snobbish on any new equipment, not any particular brand, just on anything that's virtual, analog, and new. But people say, that's if you want to get into deep programming, this is the one to go for. So, which is really nice to see.
Yeah, that's great.
So you mentioned there that in the Korg Collection 6. So you mentioned the PS-3300 just released in the Korg Collection 6, which is along with a couple of the products which we'll perhaps come back to. But this, I would say, your team was responsible for the 3300.
Yes.
And that straight away actually made it feel at home, because the editor and the effects and the librarian are pretty. I guess you share code, but they're familiar anyway. So the 2600 and the native and the Modwave native, multipoly native, they all got that look and feel to them. I think it made that side of it really easy to get into.
Yeah, I do think that is really one good thing about the platform, and it's neat to see that sort of thing being able to work over a large set of applications and plugins, and I think it allows us to do stuff with a very small team.
Yeah, and it just makes it easy for users to be able to get into it. But I suppose we should start off and say the PS-3300. Let's talk about the hardware, the original version. What is it, and why is it so sort of revered and talked about as the big synth thing that it is?
I think it doesn't hurt to be expensive, huge, rare, and early.
Yes.
And it's all of those things. So, this was in 1977, I think is when it came out, and it's possible it was 78. And there really hadn't been polyphonic synths. So the Prophet 5 came out a little bit later. The CS80 was out right around the same time. And companies were trying to figure out how to go from doing monophonic synths to having polyphonic actual synthesizers as opposed to organs. And so you had some things that were sort of organ synthy like before, but the PS-3300 really took that to a new level. So the challenge was, how do we make it so you can play more than 2 or 3 notes? And the solution that they came up with was the solution that was out there for organs, which was to use divide down circuits and just be able to jump immediately from being able to play 1 note to being able to play all the keys that you could see. And so that was a groovy thing, but having made that decision and deciding to do a synthesizer with individual filters and envelopes per voice, that left them with a great engineering challenge. So they had this synthesizer that had these 3 identical panels, each of which was fully polyphonic with 48 notes. So you had 144 synth voices to implement. And so that, of course, made demands on size, and it made demands on cost. And because of cost, you had rarity. So they made, I think people say, fewer than 50 of them over the few years that they were in production. But they were nonetheless magnificent instruments. One of the things about them is just that they're beautifully physically imposing if you've had the chance to stand in front of one. And they're actually, on the screen, things get a little bit close together, and that was actually a challenge for me, because I wanted to, when I was designing the UI, I was wanting to kind of convey this sense of space that it has. It's not a cramped panel, and that's a real challenge on the computer, because you don't have a meter wide to have your user interface. But anyway, so the thing about it is that because they were making this thing that had they'd certainly never made it before. No one had really tried to do something like this before. They came up with a bunch of novel solutions to problems, and a lot of those things were decisions that are neat and idiosyncratic and cool and just weren't used again. Because they made choices for the envelopes, for instance, because you had to have so many of them, and the filters because you had to have so many of them. So the filter, it turns out, is this type of filter that was never used in anything, I think, other than the 3300, 3200, and 3100. So you had all of these things come out of the engineering necessity, which is what typically happens with real world products. Yeah.
Yeah. So that architecture of the divide down and then the envelopes and filters. So does that literally mean then there's circuits for every single envelope for every single key, and then you've got 3 synth sections, so there's 3 times.
Yes.
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 So the components, yeah.
Yeah, there are literally 144 envelopes in an original PS-3300, and 144 filters. There are 36 oscillators because you need the top down, the top octave oscillators for each of the 3 panels, right? So you've got 12 of those per panel. So there are 36 oscillators, which is still kind of a lot of oscillators for an analog synth. And then each of those goes down and there are 144 little circuits that take the basic sawtooth from those oscillators and turn them into the waveforms that you hear.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not just sawtooth, is it? There's pulse width and triangle, I think, and then there's noise, and there's a. So that so I can see why it had to be so big, because just to physically get those components into the synth, made it huge.
Yeah, and all sorts of neat things come out of that, because you really do have on Prophet 5, for instance, you play a voice and there are 5 voice cards in there, and now I'm going to reveal my ignorance. I actually don't know if a Prophet 5 uses voice cards or if they're all on one main board. But you play a key, and you get a voice. A voice is assigned to that key. This issue of this idea of voice assignment comes in. So you've got these 5 voices. You play a key, a voice is assigned to that key. You play another key, another voice is assigned to that key. But you're not always going to get the same voice from C4, for instance. It's going to be whatever voice gets assigned to that. On the 3300, it's always the same voice. It's always the same filter, envelope, VCA, and wave shaper. And that produces some really interesting things. So first off, you've got 3 of them, right? But for C4, you've got 3 voices, 1 per panel, and it's always the same voice that's being chosen. And these are analog circuits, and so they aren't perfectly calibrated. And so you get differences in filters, you get differences in the VCA response, you get differences in the way the wave shaping works, you get differences especially in the envelopes. It's very, very noticeable. So envelope times can sometimes deviate by a factor of 2.
Right.
And that's, per panel, per note. And so every time you play that C4, it's going to have a certain combination of those things. And I heard a fantastic story from Kent Spong on a podcast the other day, where he was saying that he had been given a task by a 3300 owner to calibrate the envelopes, because it was bothering that owner that the envelopes were so different. This is, again, the physical original 3300. And so he went through the process of putting in all of those trim pots for 144 envelopes. Oh. And spending the time to tune them all up, so they played with the same timing for each envelope. And he said the owner came in and played it and was like, "Nah, put it back," because it robbed it of that very specific character. It's a very unusual thing for a synthesizer, and I don't know. There are just all sorts of things that I think sometimes might have been viewed as, idiosyncratic behavior that is annoying to someone who is used to digital perfection. But really, that's how this stuff is alive. It's these 3 relatively simple synthesizers with patching, which makes it flexible, with very, very fast LFOs that go up well into audio ranges, so you can get all sorts of kind of interesting things going on without having to patch an oscillator in. You can get that beautiful fizzy sounds that you get from modulating a filter at audio rates. You can get amplitude modulation / ring mod with by using the LFO to modulate amplitude, and you can get FM effects by modulating pitch, all from just this one little thing that, if you look at it, it looks like it's probably kind of like a Poly 6, really, but it's much deeper than that. But you have all of that, these relatively simple structure, but then it's duplicated by 3, and each note sounds a little bit different. It's alive and neat in ways that that I hadn't initially anticipated, and I've grown to really, really love.
Yeah,
So,
you can see why, just from playing the last couple of weeks, you can see why people grew to love it, because it has got that unique sound, and it doesn't sound like any other synth that you've played. Because especially on a native, you can turn the polyphony right up. That's not, that's not unique anymore.
yeah,
Like it was in '77, but it doesn't sound like you've done that. It doesn't sound like I've gone to just a Poly 6 VST and ranked up, and put it to 64 note polyphony. It's just got that unique sound, and you can't play it or program it like you would on a Poly 6 or whatever.
exactly.
It's there's something different about it.
Yeah, it takes you into this different headspace, and that's something that I hadn't necessarily been expecting. And it's been lovely to get to know it. I don't know, it's working with you were talking about the multi-poly before, and you're absolutely right that we were trying to make kind of a semi-modular like environment in the multi-poly, and that has its own character too, this great flexibility. But these idiosyncratic constraints also produce really, really neat stuff. So it's interesting kind of bouncing back and forth between the two, something that, is trying to give you, relatively infinite possibilities, and something that's, very powerful, but also constricted in different ways and just doesn't do things. It forces you to think about it a certain way. Oh, someone, this is a bit of a divergence, but 1984, the novel, George Orwell talks about newspeak, and the idea of newspeak was to make it impossible to communicate the idea of revolution. The idea was to constrict the language so that it wasn't possible to talk about revolution. And I've read linguists talking about this, saying that language actually doesn't work that way. People always find a way to express things in language. And that the more interesting thing about language is what the structure of the language forces you to think about or specify. So, for instance, we have English, which isn't a gender-based language, right? We don't. The table is neither female nor male. But in other languages, you do have to think about that and be aware of it, and that produces interesting nuances in the language. There are various Aboriginal tribes actually scattered around the world, indigenous tribes, few and far between now, that work by cardinal directions as opposed to ordinal directions. So, for instance, you would say to the student, raise your north hand.
Right.
And this is based on an intimate knowledge of the area in which you live, right? Because you always need to know what north is. And everyone always does. If you take that person out of their place, there was a story about a kid who was being trained as a dancer, and there was a school for dance, and he was taken away from his village. He had the opportunity to go away from his village to this larger village where there was a dance teacher, but he couldn't get north there. He couldn't orient himself well. So anyway, I think that when you're working with a new instrument that forces you to think about things in a different way, that forces you to think about, working in triplicate and what can I do with these layers, as opposed to what can I do, like, you have various things that you can do to each specific sound, but it stops at some point. You have to say, well, okay, I want this element from this, and this element from this, and this element from this, and your envelopes work in a particular and idiosyncratic way, and it's, I don't know, there's something lovely about being forced to think in a very different way when you approach an instrument.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's kind of why people like vintage gear as well, is it does force you down that route, because you're limited, and that is why people like the recreations. I noticed when I was doing some programming, like, you can't create the Van Halen jump type sound. Immediately that's what you do on I don't know, when you get on a polysynth, that's the kind of the first thing you do, but it's not that kind of synth you create. But when I was doing that, you ended up creating something totally different that I wouldn't have created on an Oberheim or whatever. I also found as well, funny you mentioned about that, the three layers, I've I've just created a free sound set for them. I'm going to release this week for the 3300, and I did one called the 1970s D50. Because I took that concept of the D50 with the attack and the string as the so I did the sample, which is the attack kind of a belly sound, and then an analog synth type sound, and that's where you can use those 3 layers sort of creatively. So that was quite fun to do, just thinking of that different mindset.
Yeah, that's cool. That's brilliant.
So so what made you think let's go for this 144 oscillator synth? What made you think that this was a good idea?
Well, to be frank, the 3300 came out and people asked us to work on it. So that's what we did. And it seemed like something that was sort of up our alley because we'd just come off of the 2600 and the multi-poly as well. And kind of a lot of those products were kind of mixed up and worked on in together, actually. And so we were already in the mode of doing this kind of detailed analog modeling, and the main engineer who does the modeling was really excited about it. He's very into vintage organs as well. So one of the early things that he did kind of on his own primarily was the Vox Continental. And of course we released that in KC5. But he had done that model, I don't know, a long time ago when we did the Vox Continental organ that came out in the teens somewhere, and he had modeled it on his own personal organ, and so we went back and did some improvements to that for the plugin, expanded a little bit. But he's really into vintage synths and really into top octave divider circuits, so he was totally on top of this one. And I don't know, it's, as I say, we initially thought that it was going to be simple because you look at these voices and they seem very simple. But because everything was done differently, it really was not simple at all.
I suppose it was a good candidate because without the reissue being done, you only had, well, I guess, I don't know how it wasn't fresh in the mindset of any of the engineers, was it? But with the reissue, you've actually got people working on it that you could then, I suppose, talk to and look at the schematics and everything else. So it was kind of fresh in everybody's mind.
Yes, absolutely. So, they had first gone back, and of course, Mieta still comes into the office. And Mieta is the hardware engineer who worked on the original 3300. Great guy, fantastic guy. And so they had been digging up all that they could find on the 3300. We actually don't have the complete schematics for it, but we have many of the parts. So we were able to use that as a reference, and then of course we were able to use all the schematics from the new recreation as well. And we were able to get a couple units, which, if we were working off the original, that would have been very, very difficult to get a couple units for us to work on for a long time. So, yeah, it's, yeah.
It was a perfect time to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you thought, well, okay, so this looks easy enough. How hard can it be?
Yes, exactly. How hard can it be? And we found out. Yeah.
And so the challenges of that was it the fact that you weren't working in the way, even like with the 2600, which is a similar sort of time period, just a bit earlier, but the 3300 was a different way of thinking. Was it from anything like the 2600 or the Poly 6 or any of the other synths around?
Well, I would say that the 2600 also took a long time. So we spent about a year on each of those products. So it wasn't that the 2600 was easy. We just figured, well, we've already solved some problems of audio rate patching and thinking about audio rate modulation of oscillators and filters and how to get that stuff sounding good. The issue with the PS-3300 was just that it did everything so differently. And the engineer who works on this is really pretty serious about trying to model the operation of the actual instrument, not just how it sounds, but figuring out how it works, and that's why we have all the voice variation stuff that functions properly. So the divide down oscillators, those 36 oscillators running, we actually do have 36 things generating generating sawtooths, which are then processed by these wave shapers. The wave shapers all have modeled imperfections. Everything in it has modeled imperfections based on the tolerances of the parts that were used. So there are a bunch of places where, okay, this is a 5% part, so it's going to have a 5% deviation. It's a 10% part, so it's going to have a 10% deviation. These things add up. In the case of envelopes, for instance, they control exponential parameters, so you have 5% can become a fairly large deviation. And of course, you can dial that stuff back. We have that voice variation knob, and if you don't want any of that variation, if you just want everything to sound the same, then you can turn all that stuff down. But you have these divide down oscillators that are these simple counters actually that just kind of end up adding it's a crazy way of doing it where you kind of take the waveform and you just add it onto itself, so you make this kind of taller square sawtooth wave rather. And the filter turned out to be really quite difficult because there are no digital models of this filter as far as we know in existence. This is the only one. No papers have been written. It's a very weird filter. It has apparently another resistor capacitor pair. I'm not a filter guy, but instead of just having two of them for its two-pole filter, it has a third one. It's almost like a third pole that does damping internal to the filter for the resonance. It's not an external feedback loop. One imagines that they made that choice either for reducing componentry or reducing size on the boards. But again, it's a very unusual choice, and it produces curious results from the filter. And the envelopes are these really different things. Again, they don't work like standard envelopes. They work a little bit more like an oscillator, apparently. So it's just a lot of curious stuff and a lot of nonlinear controls, and there was a lot of back and forth. The other thing that makes it harder actually is that variation again. So when we got to the point of saying, okay, we're going to try importing the sounds now. You can export sounds from the new 3300 as a librarian. So we said, okay, we're gonna take on the task of being able to import sounds from the hardware, which is groovy. But remember that I said that there's a lot of variation, note to note. And so with the 2600, I had my little 2600M right here on the side of my desk, and I could set the sliders carefully and create a sound there, and then set the sliders carefully on the software and be able to recreate the sound. And if I couldn't recreate the sound, then filed a bug and went back and fixed it, right? So with this, you kind of have to take the aggregate, like what is the correct attack time?
Yeah, and across 33 or 130, yeah.
And so what you have to do is just you play it and you say, okay, that's pretty close. Is it actually conveying? Does it sound basically the same when you play it on the hardware as the software? You can't take measurements and correct it in quite the same way that you would with something else.
And I suppose you get that the same if you've got two hardware 3200s. They're not going to be. If you turn the dials, they're not going to be identical on both of them.
Yeah, they absolutely will not be, and that's one of the reasons that we've got that CMTID thing. I don't know if you've played around with that. But if you're in the 3300, it really makes a difference. You have the stock settings, right, with everything at the kind of defaults representing the variance in the actual hardware, and you can play and you can have the settings up and just change the CMTID and notice how things change as you play. So yeah, if you want to, of course, you can leave the CMTID the same everywhere. But if you want to have it so you've got 4 3300s in the same room, then you can have them all set differently, and that C4 in each of them will sound different. And
there's got some unique things about the architecture, like the resonator. That I found that really interesting and something that I couldn't think of how to even achieve those things with onboard synthesis. Maybe external effects, but not. Yeah, you can get these phasing sounds and vocal sounds all through that. That's just not been anything that's appeared since that on any commercial synths, big name synths.
Yeah, that's really neat. And they are, that's not per voice, right? So it's like you have the resonator, these banks of resonators, one per panel. So it is kind of more like an effect.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's part of the voice and modulatable from the LFOs, that's a neat and different thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got some really nice, like almost like a, well, vocal. You can definitely get vocal sounds, but
absolutely.
phasing and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. My guess is that that originally they were thinking about string and choir synths, ensemble synths, where you use those to create formants, right, for string sound. And of course you have the big filter banks that were part of modular systems that are really quite neat also. And the fact that you could modulate the frequencies in this as opposed to having fixed filter banks, that was also a new and different kind of weird thing. So yeah, and you can. I imagine that the reason they put those in was thinking about divide down synths and wanting to make formants for strings and ensemble sounds. But then the modulation from the LFO takes it to a completely different place. As you say, these swirly, phasey sounds.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds great. And the other thing you mentioned already, the LFOs go such to a high rate that you can get ring mod sounds just by cranking up the LFO on there, and you've got loads of them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, they go up to about 1800 hertz, the big ones. The MG2s have a much more limited range. One of the things about that is that it's also the range for vibrato is very small. This is easier to deal with in software because, of course, you can just type in the number, and if you look at the help, there's the help at the bottom of the screen. It tells you the numeric range that's reasonable for the 5.5 hertz to 7.5 hertz or so that you can that sound like normal string or vocal vibrato. But it's a very, very narrow range. It's a narrow range of that knob. And this is one of the challenges apparently of working with the hardware because it has such a wide, it goes from very, very slow up to 1800 hertz or so. So, audio rate. And so that means that there's a, there's a lot of range there, and there's just a little tiny range which has your normal kind of pitch wobble, so yeah, they're neat again, and of course, yeah, we added a little bit to the MG and then took the noise from the MG and made it available on the oscillators. So that very capable MGs, quite interesting, really.
Yeah, and then of course you can then modulate the LFOs as well, and the frequency of the LFOs, which is an effect I really love, is to make the LFO speed up and slow down.
Yeah. And that's you can do that across panels, of course, right, on the original one, or do it use the MG2, right, which is just normal to pulse width, and the resonators. You can take the output of that and use that for MG1 to have it speed up and slow down, as you say, or you can use the envelopes for that too. Yeah,
and there's some of the little niceties that you put in there as well. Like I presume this is not on the hardware. You've got the MS-20 filter switch.
Yeah, that's one of the things we did, because people think of that. It's ostensibly it's a similar architecture. Those two poles are similar. It's the Korg 35, but the way the resonance works is completely different between the MS-20 and the PS. So yeah, you can reach for that much more aggressive filter.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I noticed. If you wanted something really aggressive and spend on the resonance, then you can just flick that switch, and it changes the tone of it completely then. And the other thing I noticed is, even like you mentioned about envelopes, but even the way the envelope is situated in the filter bit at the top, and I always think of ADSR, and you've got one for your VCA and one for your VCF, but it kind of doesn't default to that layout, which makes you think differently as well. So that's another thing that makes sound design interesting on it.
Well, and the fact that the filter is modulating the filter via the envelope uses this kind of expander system as opposed to an additive system, right? So the quote unquote normal way, the standard way, is for you have the envelope and you have an amount that the envelope modulates the filter cutoff, and you can set the filter cutoff at 0 and then make it so the envelope controls the whole thing or whatever. And with this, right, you set the filter cutoff and then the envelope kind of expands downward from there. So the filter, the set filter cutoff becomes sort of the attack level for the envelope. And it's a little more complicated than that, actually. Again, that interaction, all of the weird subtleties of these interactions, that was, you've heard that, the first first 90%, takes a certain amount of time, and then the second 9% takes the same amount of time, and then the third 0.9% takes the same amount of time. So you're kind of getting closer and closer and closer to this thing. Asymptotic approach to product release. And those filters, the envelopes are not. You've noticed also that the envelope switch. I don't know if you played with switching back and forth between the PS style and the modern style.
Yeah, and I like the PS style actually. I think they just, it's just unique to that thing. I really like that style.
It's a different thing. It's the attacks. I really like the sharp attack. The slow attack is this very specific thing. It sounds like someone pulling up a fader, and it produces, again, with layers. I think it's very effective. It's this interesting thing. It can kind of make something creep up behind in a way that the normal envelopes don't. Anyway. Yeah,
and of course you've got all the tuning as well. The tuning controls, the sort of the fine tune controls on the front panel there as well for each of the. So if you're into that sort of doing different tuning, I tend not to mess with that, but I know some people get really into that special tuning and things like that. So that gives you a lot of flexibility with it as well.
And you have access to that also through drift. So that drift control changes you're looking at. It's the direct tuning for those 12 oscillators, right? It's like they're trim pots for the 12 top oscillators for each. And actually, if you look at the Vox Continental, for instance, if you go to the trim pot section on that plugin, you'll find something that looks very similar to that, because that's something that you have to have for divide down organs. They have trim pots for the tuning, and I think it was a brilliant stroke to put them on the front panel on the original 3300. So my guess is that the original idea behind that was just that, you have to have these trim pots and they might as well be convenient. And then someone thought, hey, you could do this other thing with it. And I think that was the brilliant thought.
And the other thing I really like about it, and you mentioned you got 3 sections. In the last video I did with the sound pack, I kept saying oscillators, and I had to keep correcting myself. It's not 3 oscillators, it's 3 complete synths. Yeah, but there's a nice little touch with the native version is you can copy and paste them, so you can kind of get your bass sound, paste them over, and then do the adjustments, and that makes creating the sounds a lot easier as well.
And you can actually do that on the new hardware, right? Because one of the big things that they added to the reissue hardware was the ability to program it, and so there is in fact a function to copy from panel to panel. Of course, the knobs don't move, but that's a handy thing.
And then you've taken advantage of all the modern things like mod routing and MIDI mapping and everything else. So I've been playing around with some of the stuff. I've got some of the Modwave mod knobs to no multipoly, sorry, mod knobs to be able to control some bits and pieces on it as well. So and then you can set. So I could set the mod wheel to control the filter cutoff, and you can map it to all 3 and tie them together, or you can have it different. So that's nice that you're able to include that sort of modern technology in there as well.
Yeah, it was. I've been trying to do things in the sounds that I worked on. Sometimes you'd be able to see this anyways. Actually patching the mod wheel and sometimes using the voltage. Sorry, the voltage controllers. Sorry, I'm going to have to look this up now. Wow. This is the problem. I've already shifted to working on a new project, and it's, voltage processors. So anyway, using the voltage processors to scale it or invert. And again, those are sort of it's a very interesting and individual approach. It's sort of like a 2-point tracking generator, really.
And then the other thing that I really like as well is all that extra section in the 4th sort of part of the panel where you've got the voltage, like the lag processors and all that. And I learned from the 2600 how effectively you can use those. So I've used those in quite a few things, like putting a lag processor on different things just to make things just slightly out of sync between the 3 synth panels. And you've got extra LFOs in there. I think you've got an extra envelope generator with a decay time and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's
a delay.
So. Yeah, the stuff on top actually comes from the 3300, right? That's that PS-3300 module on the top, and it's one envelope, right? So it's again, it's not a polyphonic envelope. That's the general envelope, and yeah, as you say, it has delay and then attack and release, and manual trigger inputs, and then some interesting different output options for it. In fact, there's one that's so I don't know if you've played with the keyboard trigger select.
Yes, I've only played with it in 1 and 2. I think 1 was the one I use most.
There's a cool sound, and I'm going to see if I can find it very quickly. Play 4 notes stab is the sound, and that's something where you for people listening who don't have this in front of them, you are probably familiar with the idea that you can play a note and have a trigger signal come out of that, and have the trigger signal cause something to happen, like an envelope firing. But you've got this cool little thing where you can select whether 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 notes is what causes the trigger. So you can have something where you're playing 3 notes, and then you play a 4th note, and then bang, the trigger gets set and the envelope gets fired.
That's what it's for, right? Because that's why I always have it in 1 then, probably, because that's just sending the trigger out. And I've not thought... So if you set it in 3, on the 4th note, or would that, if you set it on 3, on the 3rd note, would that then trigger the right, that's interesting. Yeah,
so if you want something where you just play mono and you get one sound, but then you start playing chords, you can get a different sound. You can do that with the trigger select.
Right, that's really good, and that's what I really like about this, because in this day and age where we've got there's so many plugins available from different manufacturers, I don't need another probably 4-voice poly synth, because I've got a lot of choice for that. But this is something that I haven't got at all, and I actually recorded a track with it the other day, and it forces you, as I was saying earlier, it forces you even to play differently, and it gives it a bit of a unique. And I think that so it doesn't just sound like another synth. You've got something different.
Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised. I mean, frankly, I was not expecting that when I first encountered it. They said, okay, we're going to, we'd really like you guys to work on the 3300 next. And, I'd seen it at NAMM, and it was cool. But, digging into it, it's like, wow, okay, this is just really quite different. And, it was a fun experience to do.
Yeah. And of course, like you mentioned, it's got the library and everything else with it as well. All the stuff that we're kind of used to for modern synths. So, and I noticed in the prints you mentioned about checking it with the hardware. Some of the presets are actually the ones from the hardware, and they're not.
We have all the presets from the hardware, and then we have some outtakes also from the hardware, and we have the bank of sounds that I thought this was so awesome. Atom TM, who until I started working on this, I did not know that was the same person who did Senor Coconut, which is some of my favorite pseudo-electronic music. I don't know if you're familiar with this. The first record was Senor Coconut, and it's this kind of pink thing with this very jolly-looking, very, I think, stereotypical-looking South American band. And you look at it, and it's all Kraftwerk covers. Done with marimbas and cha-cha rhythms, and it's actually brilliant. It works so well. And then if you look in very small print, it's Senor Coconut and his conjunto, his band. And then if you look in the small print, the conjunto, the credit is S5000 and S6000. So Akai samplers are credited as the conjunto.
That's brilliant. It's a bit like, I think some of the 70s musicians used to put the drum machines. They used to name the drum machine. The sounds that come with them as well are excellent. The sound pack that comes with it. There's some really good sounds in there, really usable, and really do demonstrate the synth really well as well.
Oh, and my point was that those sounds, the Atom TM sounds, were released for the hardware 3300.
Right.
And then as you say, we've imported them here. So it was fun, and I did do some changes sometimes. In some cases, I added a little bit of control, because of course the original doesn't. It has aftertouch on the keyboard, or not the original, but the reissue has aftertouch on the keyboard, but that's created by patching. So the presets don't include patch information. And so I, in some cases, added some patching or other things to these sounds, kind of going through and listening to them. So.
Yeah, for anybody who's not seen it, and there are some patches, aren't there? So you can patch an LFO to over here. There's not perhaps as much as the 2600, but there's still enough to enjoy playing around with.
Well, and the interesting thing to get your head around with it is that because this is a polyphonic synth, and on the original, you think about it, you've got these, just TS, tip sleeve, normal quarter-inch patch jacks. You're not patching voice signals that way. You are patching primarily modulation signals and occasionally the entire audio output of whatever you're patching into. So you cannot patch things on a per voice basis. You can modulate if people have been experimenting with it, which is awesome. Taking the output of you see that signal out for the second panel, for instance, and patch it into control the frequency of the first panel, and you think, okay, well, I'm going to do FM now, and that's true, but it's not oscillator to oscillator FM. It's the entire output of this one patch panel, the polyphonic output of this one patch panel that then goes into each of the individual voices on the other panel. So you can't do things like we did on the 2600. The 2600, of course, you can play it polyphonically, but when you play it polyphonically, we're sort of pretending that you have a separate 2600 instrument for each voice. So all the patching can happen per voice. But on this is it's a model of a real instrument, and on the real instrument, the patching is strictly monophonic. Or fully polyphonic, as you want to put it. So it's almost exclusively for modulation stuff. That's what they were thinking about.
Right. That explains some of the limitations that I've seen. And actually, it goes back to almost what we were saying about the mod processors earlier on the multipoly. It's where they input into the sort of the signal chain is how it affects it. So yeah, I understand what you're saying now. You've got to, if you want to take the audio out, you're taking everything.
Yeah.
You haven't got a separate patch for each oscillator.
Yeah, and it's the same reason that, for instance, you can modulate the attack and release times of the envelopes, but you don't have a patch for the output of the envelopes because, again, there are 144 envelopes in there. You need some sort of big honkin' multi-pin to be able to patch stuff around. Yeah,
and I think that's what makes the synth really interesting. You've got to kind of change your mindset a bit and just play with it and just experiment. And I think the built-in patches are great at giving you that guide, and the help text at the bottom is really helpful.
I appreciate that.
What does this do? I mean, that's the first thing I do. Or what does this do? And why can't I do that? Because you can see it at the bottom, it kind of explains it. And you're right. It makes sense now. It's more about control voltages than audio routing. But the way you explain that now makes sense why that's the case.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's that help text. I tell people I write manuals so that I can figure it out again. So I don't need to suss everything out again and again. So I actually go back and over the course of developing the product, I went back and edited a lot of the help text, like to add all the little notes that you see, like, oh, this depends on this, or this part doesn't do this, and yeah, it's kind of groovy.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed playing with it, and like I said, it gives me sort of a different sound that I wouldn't get anywhere else. With any of the hardware or software instruments, I don't think I'll be buying a PS-3300 in the near future. So this is excellent, and you get the convenience of it being taking no space up in the desk rather than the big thing over there. So it's a really nice product.
Yeah, thank you. We had lots of fun with it. It was really a challenge. Yeah.
And I should mention as well, I don't know if these were your area, but the other plugins that come with Korg Collection 6 is the Trinity and the SGX-2. So the SGX-2 is a piano module, which is really nice, actually. Really nice piano sounds on there.
Yeah. So and that's from the so that kind of has to do with our group. You might have noticed that a lot of the structure around the SGX-2 is very familiar from KC5 and also from the 3300. So that one uses our platform. It's the same engine from the Kronos, but it was produced by Korg Inc. By folks in Korg Japan, clever folks at Korg Japan. And then the Trinity is using different underlying software system, and that's also, I don't know, that one's really neat. I always loved the Trinity. It just sounded so good.
Yeah,
So.
it's really nice. I actually quite enjoy playing with that because I went from a X3 and then then I got the Karma after that one, so I kind of skipped that generation, the Trinity. But I know a lot of people rate that they prefer that some of the sounds on that over the Trinity engine because it had some say it has a higher quality sound engine, even though it's earlier, and so there's a lot of people like that. But it's nice to get those sort of 90s sounds on there. Again, it's something different that I sort of didn't have before.
Well, it absolutely does have a higher fidelity oscillator and filter section than the Triton. So the Triton also I think sounds great. Fidelity is in the ear of the beholder sometimes. But listener, what's the equivalent? What's the oral equivalent of beholder? So the Trinity introduced this really, really high quality and very computationally expensive interpolation for the oscillators. So you don't get very much aliasing with those oscillators. It's kind of an EMU, E3, E4 level of interpolation. It's very nice. And of course the filters, they had these dual fully multi-mode resonant filters. And with the Triton, they said, well, we really need to increase the polyphony. And so they increased the polyphony. They increased all sorts of things. They used significantly more memory for the samples. And Triton was a very, very cool instrument. But to get to that doubling of polyphony, they had to take out some of the features. So the next thing that came out that had the Trinity level of interpolation in those Trinity style filters was the Oasis. And that was then used in Kronos too. So that's in Kronos we improved a little bit on the oscillators, but it's still the same basic oscillator technology as the Trinity. So that very kind of hi-fi beautiful sound, started in what was it, 96?
Yeah.
Don't know. I'd have to go back and see. All
three of them though make a really nice addition, but particularly the 3300 is the thing for me that really stood out as this is a sound designer's sort of gift because it's just different, and I think that's what really makes it interesting.
The reason, as a little Easter egg for listeners, the reason it's difficult for me to remember the year that the Trinity was released is because these chips, the chips that are used in the instruments have names which are based on the year that the chip design was started. So the Trinity is based on something called the TG92. And that also internally was what we refer to for that interpolation method, this high quality interpolation method.
Right.
Whereas the Triton, if I remember correctly, was based on the TG96. Again, this is when the chip development was started. So of course the instrument comes out some years after the chip development is started for the instrument. But anyway, so that's these numbers are in my head and compete with the numbers that for the actual release dates.
Well, it's 95. It was the Trinity. I just checked that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it shows you the gestation period. And I suppose on a general thing, is modern synths the gestation period sort of come down? Is it like commercial pressures mean you've got to shrink that development time down, or does it mean, or the technology means it's quicker to develop?
I think that's a great question, and I think it really depends on the product. So for the Oasis, for instance, it took us 4 years or so from when development really started on that. And then actually there was a TG chip, one of the last big TG chips for Korg was the TG01, which was used in the M3. Again, the M3 didn't come out for a while after that, right? And the other thing is that you make this chip, and then hopefully you make multiple products using that chip. So ASIC design, took a long time to design the chip and to make sure that it was good, and then to design hardware around that chip, and then to do all of the things to make an instrument out of that hardware. And when you had to do that, it was definitely a multi-year process. Now, my group has been producing things fairly quickly, being able to. So we have systems for prototyping on computers. Of course, we know that the the instruments run on multiple processors on multiple platforms, and yeah, that does make it faster. But I think there are some things that still just simply take time to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of we're quite demanding for features. We want polyphony, and we want MIDI, and we want USB, and we want all this and libraries and everything else that's got to take that into consideration. So the Korg Collection 6 is available from the. I'll include a link along with this. There's upgrade prices. I think I paid $99 as an upgrade from the previous one. So I think it depends on what version you get. It's how much of a discount you get, doesn't it? Yeah.
There's scalable discounts. I was actually just talking with someone about this yesterday. I think we don't publish it, but they're basically rules. And if you have, the more, if you have a recent Korg collection, for instance, it's the lowest. And then if you have, more expensive plugins, if you have, they look at how many plugins you bought and how much they spend. Well, that translates to the discount.
I bought the original Korg Legacy collection.
Wow,
the M1,
long time ago.
And I wanted it for the Wavestation basically. So so I've just kept going ever since. It's a great set. I still use my Wavestation plugin. I still love that.
Cool.
And with the Wavestate now, you can kind of recreate those on the Wavestate, those sounds as well. So yeah, still my all-time favorite synth, the Wavestation. I'm still debating whether every now and again I nearly push the button to get an original one, but I think I have no space. I can't. I'll stick with the legacy, the plug-in one. But it was actually brilliant getting on the show. I did want to say to you, I know we're not going to talk about future products because obviously you can't. But it's nice. So you guys are still working on things. You've still got things in the pipeline.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Because I can always make a little bit more space, if needed. There's always space for one more thing.
Yeah, we've just been working on something that is, I don't know, for the last week I've been playing around with something that's really exciting. So I'm having fun with it.
Yeah, that's great. Please keep up the good work, and also the support that you give to the community as well in various places, different forums and places. I always see you supporting people, which is really nice to know that you've got someone that's part of the core team being able to give out support as well, which is really nice. And I think you do a good job for supporting the community.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, it was actually brilliant getting on the show. I did want to ask you tell you what, my request is maybe one of the big multi-instruments from the late sort of 70s, maybe the Trident, Sigma, something like that. I'd love a big multi-instrument thing, and maybe a Moss board as well, because I've got the Moss board in the Karma. I do like that as well. So just a few things to put on your list.
Yep, natural requests there. Yeah. It's the Trident. Like Cherry Audio just released a Trident, and I think that we have to see how people react to differing quality in plugins. I'll be very interested to see that. I really hope that people notice the difference with the 3300, for instance. It's a challenging environment, and I really hope that people can recognize quality and really listen to stuff. That would make me happy. I want to feel like all the work that we put into this stuff is worthwhile, and I find it worthwhile when I'm playing with it, and I really hope that other people can appreciate that as well.
I think so. I think people can. If you're one of those people that has 1,000 plugins and you skim them and just play a couple of presets, maybe you wouldn't. But when you actually get into sound design and spending time with the instrument, I think that's where you can appreciate the time spent on the recreation. Then that's where you really notice it. And and if it just triggers one thing in your brain that any other plugin hasn't done, it's kind of worth it then, because it's something new comes out. Like I said, I created a track within like 2 hours of having the instrument, just from being so excited wanting to play with it. So it gives you that enthusiasm. Awesome. Yeah, which I really like. And like I said, I've got a sound pack, so I'm going to release that along with this video as well. So I just did 26.
Fantastic! I look forward to that.
So that's going to be a free download on my site as well.
Awesome! I'll be there.
Yeah. Well, Dan, it was brilliant as ever to get you on the show. I really appreciated it, and I'm really looking forward to getting you back on the next time you've got something new to get me excited about.
Or I'm happy to come back and talk anytime.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Dan.
All right, thanks, Ian. Bye.